The forest had a life of its own. Trees twisted like ancient sentinels, their roots curling over stones and streams while a pale mist clung to the ground like a shroud. Every step could betray a soul. Every sound could summon death. Lyra moved carefully, her bare feet silent against the damp earth. She had been taught since childhood to hide her scent, to breathe softly and to move like a shadow. The world outside these woods was cruel and merciless, but here, she had learned to survive. She paused, kneeling beside a silvered stream, dipping her fingers into the water. The ripple sounded louder than she wanted, but she didn't panic. Instead, she whispered an old charm, learned from her grandmother, letting the magic of the forest carry her presence away. The water's surface shimmered, reflecting the moonlight like scattered glass. A sudden sound made her stiffen. Leaves rustled to her left. A branch snapped under the weight of something enormous. She froze, heart hammering in her chest. Lyra had faced hunters before, but this was different. This presence. It was older, stronger, alive in a way that pulsed through the earth itself. Kel, the Alpha King, moved like a shadow himself. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and his senses reached far beyond what any mortal could imagine. He hunted not only with his body, but with his mind and his unmatched hearing. A single whisper, a soft sigh, a heartbeat, it all guided him to his prey. He paused, cocking his head as he listened. There it was, a faint sound almost swallowed by the mist. A human heart, steady, cautious, but present. Kale's lips curved slightly. Intrigue, long buried under centuries of power and solitude, flickered in him. The forest had delivered something different tonight. Lyra pressed herself against a moss-covered tree, trying to calm her racing heart. She could sense the danger, the weight of it pressing in like a storm. Every instinct screamed that he would find her, and yet there was something about his presence. Something terrifying and magnetic at the same time. Not yet, she whispered to herself. Stay hidden. Kale's steps were silent, impossible to hear unless one listened with their soul. He could feel the slightest disturbance in the air, the faintest echoes of movement. Lyra's charm slowed him for a moment, but it could not hide her entirely. She was clever, yes, but cleverness only delayed what was inevitable. He stopped near the stream, eyes narrowing. I know you're here, he murmured almost to himself. The words were a soft warning, but there was no anger in them, only curiosity. Kale had hunted many, but none had ever been like this. Most ran in fear, screaming, trembling. This one hid like a shadow, fearless in her silence. Lyra's hand brushed against the hilt of a small dagger hidden beneath her cloak. She didn't intend to fight, it would be useless, but the gesture comforted her. Survival was not about fighting. It was about being smarter, faster, unseen. Minutes stretched like hours. The mist seemed to thicken, wrapping around the trees, the rocks, and the stream. Lyra could barely see, but she could hear. A bird landing too loudly, the wind moving through branches, a distant wolf crying. It all told her that Kale was near, and then a sound she couldn't ignore. The softest footfall, almost a whisper, yet deliberate. He was close. Too close. Her breath caught. Kyle stepped into a clearing, the moonlight catching the edges of his form. He was taller than any human should be, broad-shouldered, with hair dark as the night sky. His eyes glimmered with something both ancient and predatory. He did not raise a hand to strike yet. He was assessing, studying, curious. Lyra's heart pounded, but she did not move. To do so would be to betray herself. To show fear might mean death, and yet she felt an unfamiliar pull toward him. Something in the way he moved, so confident and in control, stirred a strange fascination she could not explain. Kyle's gaze swept the clearing, landing finally on her shadow. His lips curved, faint, almost imperceptible. He stepped closer, and the air seemed to vibrate with the sound of his approach, though no footstep could be heard. He did not speak, but Lyra felt his presence like a wave against her chest. You hide well, he said, voice low, smooth, carrying over the stillness. But I can hear the heart of the forest, and your heartbeat. Lyra's hands clenched the edge of her cloak. She could not run, not now, not when he could sense the slightest motion. She swallowed hard, keeping her voice calm. Then you should not come closer. Kale tilted his head, amused. Why should I not? Because it could kill me, she replied softly, though her mind raced. She had always known that meeting an Alpha King meant danger. She had imagined fear, pain, maybe even death, but not this. This strange fascination that clutched at her chest. He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "You are not like the others," he said. "You do not flee. You do not tremble. You are interesting," Lyra swallowed. "Interesting will not save me." Cale's lips curved again, but this time there was a hint of something darker, something longing. "Perhaps not, but neither will hiding forever." The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of wet leaves and distant earth. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. She had lived her life in hiding, masking herself from every danger, from every predator, and yet now facing him she felt exposed in ways she had never known. Kyle's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. Lyra did not trust it. She could not. Centuries of hunting had left him wary, detached and ruthless. But still, in that fleeting moment, she saw a shadow of something human beneath the predator, a soul perhaps as lonely as her own. She knew she had to leave. Slowly, silently, Lyra backed toward the tree line, every movement measured, every breath controlled. She had trained for this moment all her life. Cale did not move after her. He let her retreat, but not because he feared her. No, he allowed it because the hunt had only begun. His senses were attuned, and he could hear the faintest sound she made. He could track her anywhere. Lyra disappeared into the mist, slipping between the roots and rocks, her cloak brushing the dew-dampened leaves. Her heart pounded, fear and something else, something electric, coursing through her veins. She had escaped, for now, but Cale would find her. She knew it. He always did. Hours later, she paused by a fallen tree, catching her breath. The forest was silent, but she could still feel him, a presence that lingered even when he was out of sight. Her survival depended on her skill, her cunning, and the magic that shielded her scent. Yet for the first time she realized that her life in hiding had left her unprepared for something else. The pull of a heart that matched her own in intensity, even if it belonged to a hunter. Cale returned to the clearing, standing silently under the moonlight. He did not search for her now. He allowed the night to hold her, letting the thrill of the chase linger. But in the quiet he whispered her name almost as a prayer. Lyra. The forest seemed to hold its breath as if it knew something had shifted. He was no longer just a hunter, and she was no longer just prey. Something had begun, something dangerous, something intoxicating, something that neither could deny. The Alpha King who hunted by sound would not rest until he claimed her, not just as prey but as a soul that challenged his own. And Lyra, the girl who hid her scent to survive, realized that her life of shadows was over. The hunt had begun in earnest, and neither of them would ever be the same. Lyra's feet barely made a sound as she moved through the dense forest. Even though Cale had not pursued her openly, she knew he could track her anywhere. Every instinct screamed that her freedom was temporary. Still, she pressed on, relying on every trick she had learned since childhood, stepping on moss, avoiding dry leaves, and whispering charms to mask her presence. Hours passed, and she stumbled upon an old stone bridge, half collapsed and covered in vines. It led to a castle hidden deep within the mountains, a place the villagers whispered about in fear. This was the castle of Cale's ancestors, said to be cursed, haunted by shadows that had not known peace for centuries. Lyra knew she had no choice. If she was to survive, she had to enter. Perhaps she could find shelter there, perhaps even answers about the Alpha King who hunted her. She took a deep breath, holding her heartbeat steady, and crossed the bridge. Inside, the castle was alive with shadows. Every hallway stretched like a maze, the walls echoing faint whispers as if the stones themselves were remembering centuries of power and violence. Candles flickered in their sconces, casting long, trembling shadows that danced along the cold stone. Kyle waited. Not in the corridors, not at the gates, but he was there. She could feel him. Not as a presence in the air, but as a pull in her chest, a tension that made her skin tingle. He was patient, waiting to see how she would move, what she would do. Lyra's cautious steps led her to the grand hall, a place with high ceilings and tapestries worn with age. She paused, catching sight of a massive throne at the far end, carved from black stone and etched with silver runes. The throne was empty, but the air around it hummed with power. "You are bold," a voice said, low and smooth, cutting through the silence. Lyra's heart leapt. Cale stepped from the shadows, moving like a ghost across the hall. His eyes glimmered with a dangerous light, and his presence filled the room like a tide. "Bold or foolish," he added, circling her slowly. "Perhaps both." I have survived this long, Lyra said, keeping her voice steady, because I do not rely on luck. And I will survive you too. Kyle's lips curved faintly. You speak as if you know me, yet you have not seen what I am capable of. You hide from death every day, but you do not hide from curiosity. That is, rare. Lyra's fingers tightened around a small dagger hidden beneath her cloak. She did not intend to fight, it would not matter, but it reminded her of the one thing she controlled. Herself. Cale's gaze softened for a moment, almost imperceptibly. Most flee, he said, voice low. You do not. You intrigue me. Lyra did not know what to say. She had spent her life avoiding danger, never drawing attention. Yet here, facing the Alpha King, she felt something unfamiliar, something like fascination mixed with fear. I do not wish to be intrigued, she said finally. I only wish to live. Kyle studied her. The hunt in his eyes had not faded, but there was something else, a weight, a question he could not answer. And yet, he said, stepping closer, you have come to my castle. You sought me whether you know it or not. Lyra's heart raced. Every instinct told her to run, but she stayed rooted, remembering all the times she had hidden, escaped, survived. This moment was different. He was no ordinary hunter. He was something ancient, something unstoppable, and yet, in some strange way, he seemed bound to her fate. I seek only safety, she said quietly. Not you, Cale's eyes narrowed. Safety? There is no safety for those who awaken the past. He gestured to the throne. You have stepped into the home of ghosts. Do you know what this place has seen? Kings who ruled with cruelty, queens betrayed by love, curses older than memory. Lyra took a step forward, gathering courage. I am not afraid of ghosts, nor of curses. For a moment, Cale studied her in silence. Then he nodded slowly. Perhaps you are stronger than you seem. Or perhaps you are foolish. He moved behind her carefully, like a shadow merging with hers. The air between them was charged, tense, almost unbearable. Lyra could feel the heat of his presence, the power in his stride, and she resisted the urge to shrink back. Instead, she raised her chin, refusing to show fear. You survive by hiding, Cale said softly, almost a whisper. But hiding only lasts so long. Eventually, one must face the storm. Lyra did not answer. She could feel the truth in his words, and yet, she feared what facing him fully would mean. He was not just a hunter. He was a king of shadows, a force of nature, and she was standing before him like a flame in the night, fragile, yet defiant. Cale circled her slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. There is more to you than survival, he said. I can feel it. Something hidden, something powerful. Why do you hide it? Lyra hesitated. Her entire life had been about hiding, concealing her scent, her presence, her power. Because if I do not, I will die, she said finally, voice firm. Cale stopped. The shadows around them seemed to hold their breath. And yet here you are in my home, standing before me. Tell me, Lyra, do you fear death or do you fear me? Her eyes met his, steady. I fear what I cannot control, and I cannot control you. A faint smile touched Cale's lips, rare and dangerous. Good. Then we understand each other in a way few ever could. Suddenly the hall darkened further. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the walls, forming shapes that whispered and moved like living things. Cale's eyes narrowed. They are restless, he said. The ancestors. They do not forgive, and they do not welcome intruders. Lyra felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Are they ghosts? Something like it, Cale replied. More than spirits, less than flesh. They guard this place. They guard me, and they will test you. Lyra took a deep breath. Then I will not fail. I will not run. Cale nodded slowly. Very well. Then you will prove yourself. Not through hiding, but through courage. By the end of this night, you may either leave or be bound to the castle as I am. The shadows seemed to surge forward, curling around them, whispering in voices older than memory. Lyra's heart pounded, yet she did not flinch. For the first time, she understood that survival was not only about hiding, it was about facing the darkness, even when it was alive and moving before her. Kyle extended a hand, slow and deliberate. Trust me and you may survive. Resist and you may perish. Choose wisely. Lyra hesitated. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to run, to hide. But something in his eyes, something beyond power, beyond the hunt, made her pause. There was a pain there, a longing, a shadow of a man she had never met but somehow recognized. She placed her hand in his, cautious, yet deliberate. The air around them shifted, charged with an energy neither fully understood. Shadows twisted, but they did not attack. Instead, they seemed to watch, waiting as if acknowledging her choice. Cale's grip was firm, commanding, but not cruel. "Good," he said softly. "You have begun the path. But beware, the castle is alive. It remembers every sin, every betrayal, and it will not forgive easily." Lyra felt a strange warmth where their hands met. Not love, not yet, but something powerful. A connection forged not in trust, but in shared survival, in facing the storm together. Hours passed as they moved through the castle. Cale taught her to listen to the whispers, to read the shadows, to move as if the walls themselves guided her. Every step drew them closer, emotionally, though neither admitted it. Every glance, every gesture was a test of power, courage, and restraint. By dawn, Lyra stood at a high balcony, looking out over the misted forest. Cale appeared beside her silently, his presence like a shadow leaning against the light. "You survived," he said softly. "But the ancestors are not done. This is only the beginning." Lyra swallowed, feeling both fear and exhilaration. "Then we face them together?" she asked. Cale's eyes glimmered. "Together," he agreed. The castle had never felt so alive. Shadows moved along the stone walls, whispering secrets of centuries past. Candles flickered, though no wind blew. Every corridor seemed to hold a pulse, a heartbeat, as if the stones themselves remembered old pains and old power. Lyra stood beside Kyle in the grand hall. The bond between them had grown, fragile yet unbreakable. Hand in hand, they had navigated the labyrinth of shadows, learning to trust the castle as much as each other. But they both knew the final test awaited. The spirits of Cale's ancestors stirred, their whispers sharp and accusing, demanding obedience and punishment for the living. Cale's jaw tightened, and his glowing eyes swept over the hall. "The time has come," he said, voice low and steady. "The ancestors will not rest until they challenge you, Lyra. They will test your courage, your strength, and—" "Your soul," Lyra nodded. Fear tightened her chest, but determination burned brighter. She had survived the forest, evaded death countless times, and faced Cale himself without faltering. She would not back down now. A chill swept through the hall, and the shadows thickened, forming shapes like statues that moved with a life of their own. Figures from history, kings, queens, warriors, emerged in translucent form, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They circled Cale and Lyra, whispering in languages older than memory. Cale placed his hand over hers. "Remember, trust in me. Trust in yourself. That is how we survive." Lyra inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "I trust you." The shadows lunged, not with malice, but with power, a force that tested every skill and instinct she possessed. Lyra dodged and weaved, moving with silent grace, her senses attuned to every movement. Cale fought beside her, not as a predator but as an ally, combining his strength and his unique connection to the castle with her cunning and agility. A figure loomed closer, larger than the rest, its eyes blazing with fury, the spirit of one of Cale's ancestors. A king who had ruled with iron and betrayal stepped forward. Its voice was like grinding stone. "You dare enter this place, mortal? You dare challenge our will?" Lyra did not flinch. "I am not here to challenge," she said firmly. "I am here to survive. And I am not alone." Cale's grip tightened on her hand, his presence a steady anchor. Together they moved as one. The king's spirit lunged, but Lyra used a subtle charm, learned from the forest, to turn the spirit's energy against itself. The light flickered, and the figure shrank back, unwilling to break the rules of its own curse. "You are clever," the spirit hissed, "but cleverness alone does not break fate." Kyle stepped forward, his voice echoing through the hall. "Then fate must bend. Not by cruelty, not by fear, but by trust and courage." The shadows paused, as if surprised. Lyra felt the energy shift, the hall vibrating with the weight of their judgment. She took a step forward, unafraid, letting her confidence guide her movements. Every heartbeat, every breath became part of a rhythm that the castle itself seemed to recognize. Together, Cale and Lyra moved through the hall, weaving between spirits, using their combined instincts and willpower. They faced trials of fire and shadow, illusions of pain and fear, each one more daunting than the last. But through it all, their bond grew. Cale's centuries of solitude had taught him control, But with Lyra, he learned patience, vulnerability, and trust. Lyra, who had spent her life hiding, learned courage, and that she could shape her destiny, even in the face of overwhelming power. Finally, the largest shadow emerged again. The ancestral king, radiating rage and authority. Cale stepped in front of Lyra, but she touched his arm. "Not me," she said softly. "We face this together." Cale's eyes softened. "Together," he agreed. The spirit roared, an echoing sound that made the hall tremble. Cale and Lyra stood side by side, facing it. They moved in unison, Cale's strength and control blending with Lyra's intuition and cunning. They did not fight out of hatred or aggression. They fought with understanding, with trust, with unity. The spirit's form flickered, uncertain. "What is this?" it demanded. "How can two mortal souls withstand what centuries have bound us to?" Lyra stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "Because we are not bound by the past. We are not enemies. We are alive and we choose each other," Cale added, his voice resonant. "Love does not weaken. Love transforms. And in that transformation, even shadows can be made to bend." The ancestral spirit faltered, and then, with a final shudder, it dissipated into the air, leaving behind a faint glow. The other spirits watched silently, then followed, retreating into the stone walls, leaving the hall empty and still. Lyra exhaled, relief washing over her. Kyle turned to her, eyes glowing softly, and smiled for the first time without shadows of judgment or hunger. "You have done it," he said. "You have faced the curse and we have survived." She nodded, though exhaustion weighed on her. "I couldn't have done it alone, and I wouldn't have wanted to." Kyle's gaze softened, filled with something centuries of solitude had never known. Warmth, connection, and the faintest hint of vulnerability. "You are extraordinary, Lyra," he said quietly. "Not just for surviving, but for standing beside me, for trusting me, for the first time." Lyra felt safe in his presence, not because he could kill anyone who opposed her, but because he had chosen to protect her willingly, without coercion, without domination. Their bond was no longer predator and prey. It was partnership, trust, and perhaps the beginning of something more. They walked to the balcony together as the first light of dawn spilled over the forest beyond. The mist rolled gently, softening the edges of the castle and the forest alike. Lyra leaned against the railing, feeling the warmth of Cale beside her. "Do you think the world will forgive us?" she asked softly. Cale shook his head. "The world rarely forgives those who change fate. But we do not need its forgiveness. We have each other, and that is enough." A silence settled between them, comfortable and charged with unspoken emotion. The forest seemed peaceful now, the shadows retreating, as if acknowledging that the battle was over. For now. Yet even in this quiet, Lyra felt the weight of what had occurred. They had faced centuries of anger, curses, and judgment, and emerged alive together. That bond could not be broken easily, nor could it be ignored. It was powerful, alive, and deeply transforming. Cale turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was careful, respectful, yet intimate, a connection neither of them had allowed before. "Lyra," he said, "what happens next is ours to decide. But know this, I will not let anything harm you. Not now, not ever." Her hand went to his chest, feeling the steady pulse beneath his skin, something that had always been stronger than any mortal's, yet somehow matched her own in rhythm and intensity. "And I will not run," she whispered. "Not from you, not from this." The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint whisper, the echo of the ancestors perhaps, or the forest itself. It spoke no words, only a warning, a reminder that life was never simple, that danger could return. But Lyra and Cale had survived it together. As the sun rose fully over the forest, bathing the castle in golden light, Cale and Lyra stood side by side, looking out at the world that waited beyond. They had faced death, shadows, and curses, and emerged changed, not just as survivors, but as equals bound by courage, trust, and a bond that neither time nor darkness could sever. The hunt had ended, but their story was only beginning. And in that beginning, both of them felt something they had never known before. Hope. And the quiet, thrilling promise of love born in shadows.